Prepare to step into a world where imagination knows no bounds as we present Legends, Loot, and Lore. Join your hosts, Andrew and Joe, the dice-rolling dynamic duo who will guide you every step of the way into the realm of Dungeons & Dragons. From crafting narratives to character creation, this podcast is your gateway to becoming the hero of your own story. Whether you're a new adventurer or a seasoned traveler seeking new insights, Legends, Loot, and Lore has something for everyone. After the episode, visit our website at www.legendslootandlore.com for even more resources and exclusive content. And if you're as passionate about this adventure as we are, help support our quest at legendslootandlore.supercast.com. Embark on this odyssey with us and let the echoes of ancient tales guide you toward a destiny filled with limitless possibilities. Roll for initiative, because your adventure begins now.
Welcome, adventurers, to another episode of Legends, Loot, and Lore. Today we are thrilled to have a very special guest joining us on our magical journey through the realms of Dungeons & Dragons. Please give a warm welcome to the seasoned Dungeon Master Extraordinaire, James Bergold. With a wealth of experience in guiding countless D&D adventures, particularly with new players, James is a true master of storytelling and a fountain of wisdom for anyone curious about stepping into the captivating world of D&D. Whether you are a curious newcomer eager to embark on your very first campaign, or a seasoned player looking to enhance your DM skills, James has invaluable advice to offer. From character creation to weaving epic narratives, he'll share essential tips and tricks that are sure to ignite your imagination and set you on an unforgettable quest. So without further ado, let's roll initiative and dive into this exciting new episode of Legends, Loot, and Lore with the one and only James Bergold. James, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I appreciate it, and I have to, right off the bat, I have to give you credit for something.
Oh.
And I don't know if you know this, but I want to tell you about it because, Andrew, you are the inspiration for one of the characters in my campaign. Specifically, you told me about your character, and that I made kind of surrounding that, I made a Tabaxi in your honor that is in my campaign that mystified my players to no end.
Nice.
For the longest time. So I wanted you to know about that. I also wanted to give you proper credit. I will always give you credit for that character that I created because it's been a lot of fun.
That's great.
You know, to kind of, I mean, she's an NPC, but at the same time, you know, they didn't know what to make of her at first. And that was kind of fun. It's like, who is this Tabaxi? Like, what is going on with her? So that's just fun. And
great.
And you helped me with that. So I'm forever grateful for you because that's just been a blast playing that character.
Thank you. So for those who are listening who may not know what race a Tabaxi is, it is a feline race within Dungeons and Dragons. I originally created a blind Tabaxi monk named Draufganger, which is German for daredevil, because I fashioned the character after the comic book hero Matt Murdock, Daredevil. So that was my inspiration for that character, and I loved it. It was such a fun character. I literally still have the little minifigure on my desk right in front of me here from that character, because it's probably one of my absolute favorites that I have played over the years. So thank you. That's really nice of you to say. They're fun. Yeah. They're fun characters to play.
They really are. And I mean, that's one of the things I think when we talk to, you know, you're right. I love beginning players. And I've had nothing but good experiences with a lot of first-time players. And funny enough, my own brother and my daughter are two of them. And on two different occasions, I got to play, like, it was Christmas time, and my my nephew had asked me all about Dungeons and Dragons. He's like, Uncle James, you've DM'd for a long time, and like, can you tell me how I can get out of this because my character got mind controlled or something like that. Like, he's all sort of excited. He's like, Mom told me you play Dungeons and Dragons, and he just thought it was the coolest thing. So I'm like the cool uncle, right?
That's
gotta
awesome.
love that. But playing with my brother, because my brother was little when I was playing, when I first played in high school. So he was always curious about it. But we never played. And I always thought it was funny. And, he's a guitar player and he wanted to play a musician. He wanted to play a bard. So that's
perfect.
I think it's a big thing. He loved it because then he learned about vicious mockery, which is a spell for bards.
Ooh,
for you guys listening. And it's just like literally insulting. And it's perfect for him, really.
Insults that really truly inflict.
Yes,
they say sticks and stones, but
right.
But vicious mockery will definitely hurt as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great.
So, it's really. I think the really fun thing when you have a new player is like people are hesitant. Like you and I have talked about this. Like, what are their hesitations for starting to play and everything? And a lot of times people are like, wow, there's so much stuff. And there's I say there's a pencil, a piece of paper, and maybe some dice, but dice can become an addiction. Just be warned. That's,
I suffer from that issue.
I do. I'm a raging dice goblin if ever there was one. And there's way, too many dice to count. So
I know we're going to a Comic-Con this weekend and I've got to behave myself. I've already scoped out the vendor list and I see the dice vendor and I'm like, ooh.
Like, oh, that's going to be a problem.
That's right.
I could have some real difficulties. I better run past these guys.
Oh, for sure.
And that's
but it really we've talked about this on the podcast before, how simple it really is to get into the, like, you can certainly overcomplicate it, but it really is a very simple and easy kind of game to get into. There's a low barrier of entry, at least cost wise, but it's kind of figure it out as you go along. I mean, that's why it's great starting out as a level 1 character, because you don't, if you're a spellcaster, you don't have a ton of spells to remember.
Yep.
You don't have a lot of features or things. So as your character levels up throughout the game, you gain that experience as well. So I think it's really ideal for somebody who wants to get into it, kind of not really knowing what's going on. And especially if you have a great DM like yourself to help guide them down that path.
Yeah, I think it's, I was thinking about this when you asked me the question of like, what's a good thing for new players to learn. I'm like, bring your imagination.
Mm-hmm.
It's the simplest, most truthful thing I could probably say is like, do you like stories? Do you want to tell a story? You want to help tell a story?
Because you want to be part of the story,
Yeah, you want to what part of the story can you be?
Mm-hmm.
And it's fun to see, like you're saying, when you start out as first level player, like all my players, they started out as first level in this group I have, and 3 of the players were brand new players. And it was only that I was talking to the 2 more experienced players, and they're like, "Oh, we would love to learn how to play. Oh, I've always wanted to play that." Right. And whatever barrier was there, either they didn't have people to play with,
right,
or what have you, that like, it's easy, like, oh, absolutely, you can play. Everybody can play. If you don't want to play, you can watch. How about you watch? If you don't want to play, if you're not ready to, okay. How about this? How about, like, I've approached it in many ways, and I've let people that haven't played, I've even offered them, like, hey, how about this? How about you be the voice of a character that's already in the story? You just want to try it out. You want to try it out for an evening, and then we see if you want a character.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if there's really a hesitation, that's what I think I always turn to, is maybe you can lend your voice to the story at first.
Right.
Like, just, and all you have to do, I'll tell you I tell you who they are, and you put whatever spin on it, and that becomes the part of the story.
That's
And
an interesting way to kind of ease yourself into the game. Basically being an NPC and
you get a guest
interacting.
star role.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I continuously offer, and I hope I've said this to you as well, but like I offer everybody, like, look, you want a guest star? You want to play for a night? You don't have the time for the camp? Come in and be a guest star one night. I'll let you be a villain. I'll let you be here, like whatever you want. I can put you in that story, and that's one of the great things about this game is it is simple when you think about it, but
Right.
it can encompass such complexity because you can get a pre-made world, or you can build your own.
Yeah. For
I
sure.
mean, you know, I I think um, people have asked me like, well, could you do a story on this? And it could be anything. So in fact, I am working on a campaign, like a series of one shots
Mm-hmm.
based on the Golden Girls.
I think that's so give us some insight into what that looks like.
Okay.
What have you worked on so far?
Okay. So somebody had told me like the basic premise for the latest version of Dungeons and Dragons. They thought of what is the basic party.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's a fighter, a magic user, a thief, and a cleric or healer, right?
Right.
So you have to have those four making up an ideal group. You can pretty much do anything with those four classes together. So they said basically that Dungeons and Dragons 5e party is based on the Golden Girls. And each of the Golden Girls represents one of those classes. So you have Dorothy, who's B. Arthur, and she's the fighter.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. You have Betty White. She's the cleric. She's the healer. She's the holier one, right? You have
Yes.
Reuben Clanahan, who plays the Southern
Blanche.
Blanche. Thank you.
Such a Blanche.
And she plays, and it goes back and forth between she's either a bard or she's a rogue. She could be either one, right?
Can she multi-class as a bard / rogue?
It could easily be. She could fit into either of those classes, right? She could.
Uh-huh.
And then you have Sophia, who's the magic user. She's the wizard. And I thought that I never knew that, and I thought that was hilarious.
Very interesting. It doesn't have to be your traditional medieval kind of dungeon crawl. We did a one shot with Joe, our other host, and it was a Christmas themed one shot when I think we all had candy cane themed weapons. One was like one shot like hot chocolate. They were there. It was like a whole
Nice.
random thing, and I think it was Krampus that we were like trying to defeat. He was the big bad of that one shot, but it was hysterical. So you're absolutely right. It doesn't have to be your traditional world for Dungeons and Dragons. There's the framework that they have built out can really be laid over any type of environment with any type of character. So I think that can definitely make it much more welcoming to others who are not necessarily comfortable with that with that typical D&D environment that you would think of.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that one shot is I created a side adventure as well that was a Christmas themed thing, but
Mm-hmm.
I kind of, they're like, oh, it's coming close to Christmas, and we don't have a lot of time or whatever. But I set up this whole side adventure, and they started going down that path. But best laid plans don't ever they don't always go as planned, right?
Well, I always say the job of the party is to thwart the DM's plans.
It happens every time.
Oh,
It
yeah.
happens every time. And you know what? The most fun you have, you can't be as a DM. I will tell you, like, you got to go with that. You got to go
Absolutely.
with that because, gosh, it can be so much fun. Because it's like, okay, my nephew came to me and he said, "Will you play with us? Like, will you play?" I'm like, "Absolutely, 100%." And there was something in every room. And then he didn't believe me. Like, he said, "Oh, well, Uncle James, you DM'd a lot." Like, and he would tell his brother and my brother. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
"Uncle James is going to kill us because he's the DM and he's going to look to destroy us." And the funny thing is, that is far from what I am as a DM. Like, can it happen? Yeah, but what's the fun of? It's not me against you. It's
Right.
us telling a story, right? And he searched an empty room, but he insisted he was convinced that there was something in the room. And I had him roll the search, and he rolled a nat one.
Uh-huh.
So basically, the premise became he hit his head and went unconscious. He didn't know this, but he kept on searching the room, and I basically turned the room into a giant blender, and he was making a pina colada. Like, stuff's kept on falling into the room.
That's
And at the
fantastic.
end, he's like, but my character's going to die. And I'm like, is your character going to die? Well, he could drown if I don't get out of it. And he managed to get out of it. And he goes, what do I see? And I'm like, you see the bunk that you hit your head on and knocked yourself unconscious. And he stepped back and he goes, Uncle James, I'm going to need a minute.
That's fantastic.
Because it was this thing, and it was like, build it, but it was out of the ordinary.
Right.
It was not anything planned. You turn a room into a giant blender and make a daiquiri. Like, silly stuff happens, and I think that's something that it's something to know, but it's also something to embrace because what's the worst? What's the worst that can happen? You're letting everybody have fun. You're making a safe, fun place for people just to express themselves and just have fun.
I think that's what people who have anyone who has not played D&D or has not seen just kind of a regular game of D&D being played need to understand that it really is just a lot of fun. It can get silly at times. It can get very, very tense, if you're in a battle and your forces are dwindling. But it's always a tremendous amount of fun. And I always come out of the back end of a D&D session always just enjoying myself. And there's always so many stories that you have to tell with your party, as time goes on. And it really is just a lot of fun. It just.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
if that's if I tell you the common things that I find is that, first of all, you make a table full of friends. You're having a blast. You're having fun, and it can be nonsensical. It can be serious. It can be really dramatic. It can be terrifying. It's all of those things. It's like, well, what kind of movies do you like? What kind of, like, I ask players, like, what part of the story do you want to be? What is your story? And not everybody has the answer right away. And I don't think you have to have it right away, especially if you're starting at first level. You like, one of the great things I heard even recently is like, well, what's your character's job? And the knee jerk reaction is to say, oh, well, I'm a thief, or yeah, but what do they do? What did they do before they became a thief?
Mm-hmm.
Like, were they a farmer? Were they just a peasant, or whether they, fallen royalty or royalty, whatever? Like, what was their job? And I thought that was a really interesting approach because it's like, you could be anything. You could have a background. You can make any character you wish. And I was asked recently, I started playing with a group that I hadn't played with because of COVID and everything. And we, after 2 years, we started playing just recently.
Right.
And one of the premises was they were feeding me information about their characters because I let them start at a higher level.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only because I played with them before, but I wanted them to have some more options in this campaign. and whatnot. So the short answer was she said she had tattoos or markings on her arm that she couldn't explain. This is like a gift. When players give you those things, when they give you those little pieces of backstory and each one of them gave me something that fit almost perfectly into the campaign. And that's the thing you look for. If that can happen, oh my gosh, it's like candy. It's just delicious. And you get great ideas. Like if you think, oh well, I'm a new player, and maybe I don't know what to do. I'm like, that's okay. What do you think you should do? What do you think you want to do? I think those are important questions to know. Like, hey, is this possible? Like, can I step back and ask you a question? Sure, absolutely. Yes. I won't. I won't automatically assume that you're asking me that in the game because you're learning how to play.
Right.
Right. And I think that having that environment and saying, "Is this possible?" And I've seen some really creative solutions. And I've seen dumb things happen. I remember an early dungeon that I was early on in playing. I played a dungeon with friends, and the guy who was the magic user decided to throw a fireball, but he wasn't paying attention to the details, and it turns out the dungeon was made of ice, and we all died because he drowned us all. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like, I'm a wizard. I want to throw my fireball, that kind of thing.
I made a similar mistake. I was talking about this with somebody earlier today. We were trapped in a library. It was a multi-level building. We were on this floor. It was a library, and there was a trap door that was locked that we could not open. There was some trick to opening it, and we couldn't get it open. But we were being attacked in this library, and I my rash kind of quick reaction was there was a bunch of enemies, and I'm like, I cast fireball, and the DM said, "Are you sure you want to do that?" I said, "Yes, I want to take out as many of these enemies as possible." So I cast fireball, and resulted in lighting half of the library on fire because it's full of books and wood shelves. And
oh my god!
And quickly, the room is filling with smoke as we're trapped.
Full of fuel.
So there are consequences to your actions, even in D&D.
Yeah,
for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? Not for anything. How much fun did you have?
I had a blast because then all of a sudden it's like, oh my god, we have to get out of here, and now you're trying to figure out how to get out of there. But I think you were talking about something really interesting, and I think it's a great point is developing the backstory of your character, and this is where I think it gets to be a lot of fun. So as you get to make up the story of who this person is. It's not.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with who you are as a person. You can write it as anything. You can, again, you could be a commoner who married a prince and now you're royalty, or you could be, I was in one of our adventures. I played a Haragon, the rabbit race, but what it was the background was he was actually originally the rabbit of a magician in a traveling circus, and he was the rabbit that was always getting pulled out of the hat, and suddenly a bolt of magical lightning hit the magician, and the magician and the rabbit changed places. So he was the rabbit ended up becoming a sorcerer. So he had all the magic powers that the magician had, and now the magician was a tiny little human. So they changed places, and now the rabbit was out adventuring and running away from the magician who was trying to get his powers back. So he
That's
was the rabbit was on the run, and he joined up with this party and was always on the run in fear of being caught by the magician. So that was the backstory I wrote for one character. So it could literally be anything. It's like you said, you're only limited by your imagination.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I don't think that so I played with this group, and when my friend Drea found out I played Dungeons and Dragons, she's like, "Oh my gosh, you have to play with us. I will be the DM." I'm like, "No, I could DM if you want." Like that. She goes, "No, I would love to DM and see what you come up with, what kind of lunacy." And it's and truthfully, I hung back and I said, "Look, I want everybody to have a good time, and I know I'm the most experienced player you have at your table, but I want everybody to have fun. I want them to let them go first. I could figure it out. I can be the tank. I can take all the damage. I can take I don't have to do anything weird or exciting or anything,
Right.
because I am having a blast playing with you guys again, and I'm all about that, right?" And it was fun. But then slowly I've been giving them my backstory for this character as we level up, and I don't. I think some people can hesitate to say, "Oh, I got to come up with a story and how many pages, and I'm got to write something." And like for some people, it could be a stopper, right? And you don't want there to be any. You don't want there to be any stoppers, right? So I say it's okay. Like, hey, look, I'm the DM. You just tell me what the story is, even if you write it a line at a time, even if But it. I think it becomes a positive thing if you're writing that backstory with the DM, who can give you, like, for all my players, what I did was I said, okay, what do you want to do? And I have somebody who wanted to be a shapeshifter. I'm like, great. And their good friend happens to be a werewolf. The player is well, I'm sorry. One is a changeling and one is a shifter. One is a werewolf.
Right.
And but they know each other. And he was in a different form. They walk in the bar, and I'm like, and the werewolf player comes in, and I'm like, yeah, you know who this is because you smell him, right? And just automatically, like, I'm thinking dog, greater nose receptors, the whole thing,
Makes sense.
And played it off that way. It's like you automatically know this is Joe,
right?
And that's a lot of fun because it's like, those reveals after a while, they can be a lot of fun because you go, okay, over however many sessions, you go like, okay, I slowly wrote my backstory because I'm learning how to play. And I think that's perfect because then as you reveal it, like, I had a player that I told him, he said, like, I'd like to be part of a secret order that protects people. I'm like, perfect. I have one of those. I'm like, you're
you just so happen to have one of those.
I just so happen, but I did. And that's the funny thing. Like, my players have gifted me incredibly. Like, I come up with these ideas and I'm like, yeah, maybe this will make it. Maybe then, like, I have list upon list in my phone of all of this, giving myself source material out of nowhere. And I just start writing and whatnot. Right. And so he's like, he said this, he goes, I'm kind of a protector. And I said, okay, you are now a member of the Silver Talon, and it's a secret society of protectors that doesn't have boundaries. They don't have borders. They protect people in power, so they can't be kidnapped or somebody can't imitate them or what have you. Like all of this stuff, right? So here are the players, and now he's a first time player, and here are the players, and they come into this room. They go under the city, and they're hiding because somebody's after them. And they come into this room, and he automatically recognizes the symbol. I said, what is your, give me a perception roll. And he rolls high. And I'm like, yeah, you realize that at the table, you see on their hands, you see a ring. And it's usually a ring, a brooch, or a dagger, or the hilt of a sword, or whatever that has this marking on it. Right. And it can look a little different, but they recognize it immediately. And so what does he do? But very smoothly, he takes his sword, he puts it on the table, and he says, "I live to serve." And the rest of the players go, "What?" It's this shocking moment. And they're like, "You're the newbie. Like, what is going on?"
That's great.
And he just got the greatest, like, you could see he was just beaming, because he's just like, I know who these guys are and they're on my side, kind of thing. Right. And they're like, what the hell just happened? What happened? Right. And that's a fun thing that you can do. Even part of your backstory is like the little secret that you share with the DM. That's delicious.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's like you have this little thing, and I gave each of them that opportunity. Like, what do you want this to be? What do you where does this come from? Why is this way? And it can change. It can change throughout the game. It doesn't have to be a static thing. And I think that's another wonderful thing, is that there's nothing set in stone. The rule of cool always applies. And that just makes it so much fun for everybody. It's like, oh, I got this now. You know what? I realize I can do this. And they would send me stuff, and I'm like, okay, this is where you come from then, because this is the place you come from. This is what's around you, and try to give them geography and backstory to different things that, I'm like, how do you think that fits in and everything? And it becomes collaborative storytelling. And that's why this game is so amazing. And just to start out, gosh, I'd love to be a newbie again. That's why I love people who want to learn. It's like, I remember how fun that was, right?
So what do you say to the person that comes up to you and says, "Hey, I'm interested in playing D&D. I know nothing about it. What's your elevator pitch to get them into the game, and how do you how do you get them into the game? And let's say what are the 3 key pieces of information somebody should have walking into it?" So we said there's very little barrier to entry. There's very little set up to it. So, but what are how do you get somebody into the game? And then what do you say? Like, what do you say here? These are, if you had to give maybe advice or say, this is really the key things you need to know to play, and then just let them loose.
I really enjoy, I think it's satisfying, but I get the most reaction when I ask people. I like to ask questions instead of saying, "Hey, you should do this, this is it." Okay. I like to ask them questions. What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite book? Right? What's your favorite TV show? Like, I want to know those favorite things, because I don't want to know the person, but at the same time, literally one of my favorite questions is, what was your favorite toy when you were growing up?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah, because it tells you something about the person. Because I love the fact that when people start talking about that, their eyes light up and they get genuinely excited.
So I will tell you it wasn't a specific favorite toy. Yeah. I was a big G.I. Joe fan. Oh, nice. And it was so funny. So my brother and I was probably more pro Cobra, 'cause I always loved the bad guys, because they always had the cooler toys. They had like the cooler weapons and stuff. But this was back in the days of like when like camcorders first came out, and my brother and I were in the basement, and we were like making movies with our G.I. Joe characters. I love it. And it was, I love, so that's like my first experience in telling stories and kind of role playing the different characters. Yeah. But I was I was obsessed with GI Joe and the figures and the vehicles and the GI Joe base. Like I had like the
Yeah.
whole thing.
Oh
It
my
was
gosh.
crazy. So I was
Oh my gosh.
like
Yeah.
obsessed, and so that's like I loved watching the cartoon show. So like I loved that whole concept, and so that's my favorite toy as a kid growing up.
That's awesome. I love it.
I loved
I
it.
love it.
Absolutely obsessed.
I used to live up in Rhode Island, and
Mm-hmm.
when you go into a Toys R Us in Rhode Island's the home of Hasbro.
Is it
And
really?
I remember I was going to college up in Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a year. I was going to go to Rhode Island School of Design. I decided not to, but I was up there, and it was my brother's birthday coming up, and I love GI Joe. Oh my gosh! But he was of the age of really playing with it, and I was in college,
Right.
and I couldn't resist. And for his birthday, I went hog wild. And they had moved from Rhode Island to New Jersey,
Right.
and I came in and I had boxes and everything wrapped up for him. And I got him like all these figures and
Oh man.
the big black plane and everything. And I was like,
Oh, I remember
oh
that.
my gosh, this
Yeah.
is like, I think I got him the aircraft carrier for Christmas. Like, but here's the thing:
Uh-huh.
what nobody will tell you is, it was probably the place to go was Rhode Island, because Hasbro subsidized all the Toys R Us, and it was so cheap to get GI Joes at the time.
Oh man,
That's why
I
I
wish
got
I
so
had
much
known
for them,
that.
because I'm like, I'm a college student on a budget, and I got to buy my little brother all this GI Joe stuff, and I'm like, this is awesome.
That's
Like, this is all the
great.
stuff that I would want. But yeah, love. I love that answer. I love the GI Joes.
I'd
But
love a GI Joe themed D&D adventure. That would be like
and that's the beautiful thing about it
you could
is
do it.
you can do it.
Yeah.
You can make Snake Eyes, and you can make Storm Shadow, and the whole,
Mm-hmm.
like, you can make every character. It's entirely possible. And remind me sometime, because I will share with you pictures. I don't know. A friend of mine does GI Joe cosplay.
Are you talking about Keith?
Yes. Oh, you know Keith.
I
That's
know
right.
Keith.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Keith has
love it.
done
I love
some.
his cosplay. He's
Yeah.
amazing.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I think, I showed somebody, like, I showed him the GI Joe, and I
Uh-huh.
showed him the Tintin
Oh
that he
yeah.
did. Like, oh my gosh, like, he's just into it. And he sews and everything. He does the whole 9 yards.
It's impressive.
So yeah, it's amazing. So but yeah, it's like, what's the thing you want to do? What's the adventure you want to have? Like, what is it? It doesn't have to be medieval high fantasy.
No,
You
not
know,
at all.
look, I think about, I was up at the Renaissance Festival one time, and this
Mm-hmm.
whole club of Star Trek fans, and they were a club, and there was another club, and they met them up there, and they were a Klingon club. And what they did was they pretended that they were in Star Trek, and they got caught in the holodeck, and they had their whole adventure. Like, they spent the day at the Renaissance Festival in Star Trek costumes at the Renaissance Festival.
That's amazing. That
Right?
sounds that's like straight out of Next Generation.
Yeah,
Like for sure.
absolutely. But it's, what is it? What is that? That's pretend, right?
Like again, you're only limited by your imagination.
Exactly.
That's
And
absolutely the truth.
yeah, I get that. That's, Star Trek at the Renaissance Festival isn't it. Believe it or not, it's related. It's related in the way that you're pretending, you have your imagination, and it is a wide open landscape, because it's as simple as a pencil and paper. It's as complex as a fully realized world, with political intrigue
Mm-hmm.
and like, when I started building my homebrew campaign, I wanted it to be approachable by anybody, but I put in some different things that my players don't know about. And I won't say here during the
No
interview. I will
spoilers.
tell.
No spoilers.
Yeah, I don't want any spoilers, because I've told them all they should listen to you. Like, I told them all they should subscribe to your podcast.
Thank you.
And yeah, and so they hear this, they're like, what's coming. But no spoilers. No spoilers.
That's right.
But just some of the premises that I've encountered over the years, like I had newbie players go into a dungeon and they ran into a dragon. Like I let them go the way and they found this thing. There is no way that the whole party would have been dead.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But they knew they had been in a fight. They had tripped a few traps and everything. And they came upon a dragon. But instead of fighting the dragon, they talked to the dragon. And they played chess with the dragon instead of fighting him.
It has flashbacks of Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey playing Battleship with the Grim Reaper.
Yes. Oh, yes. Nice. Yes.
You sank my battleship.
Yeah, I came up with roles and I said, here's how you do. But they're like,
That's
how,
amazing.
and they expected, because he was like this old dragon, they're like, so how long does it take him to beat me? And they just all assumed that they could not beat the dragon in chess. So they didn't play actual chess. I came up with a series of roles of how they did, like performance roles, basically, and the dragon had advantage,
right?
And because it was his lair, and he invited them, and basically, and in the end, he was so enamored with the Cardius and, rolled charisma checks and everything else like that. In the end, he's like, here, I'll let you take something from my hoard because you came and you kept me company and you talked to me and you amused me and we played chess and you made me very happy. So you may each have, and I granted them one, I gave them a choice of like a few items,
right?
And they each took an item, and it was a magical item, and it wasn't anything game changing or anything, but it was just having that, like, I played chess with a dragon and I won a sword. Like, how cool is that?
I say I'm very similar sometimes because it's sometimes I try to find creative ways of solving a problem instead of being the murder hobo and just going in with my sword and attacking or whatever weapon I have. And I can't remember if I've talked about this before, but there was in our most recent campaign, I had the invisibility spell. And we went into the courtyard of this castle, and suddenly about 25 enemies came out because we were making so much noise. They came out and to see what was going on. And there was two separate groups. There was a group of kobolds and there was a group of cultists, human cultists. And what I did was I turned invisible. I ran into the center of the group of cultists and shouted something. I shouted insults at the kobolds. And so I think I had to roll persuasion. I had to roll some sort of ability check. Fortunately, I rolled high enough. So the kobolds thought that the cultists were insulting them. So the kobolds attacked the cultists, and we as a party then ran in the opposite direction and avoided having to fight like 25 different people.
Yeah.
So it's just the creativity. It doesn't always have to be what's expected. And I've talked a lot about that in character creation. You don't have to, and Joe has talked about that as well. You don't have to do what is necessarily expected of a race, of a class, etc. You don't have to follow exactly what's in the rules.
No, you don't. No, I mean, not at all. But I think one of the things that I can't stress enough for even, I have a player that played a lot of video games, and we talked about this, and
yes,
and he's very much, I want to finish the level.
Right.
I got to hit every room. I'm like, well, did you draw a map? Like that kind of thing. Yes, I reveal a map, and it's funny because I'll ask them, and they're like, "What? You don't have the map?" I'm like, "Did you keep a map?" Like, I'm just saying, You're like, but wait a minute, usually you give us the map. And I'm like, this is theater of the mind, my friend. Yes, there are times that I give you maps and times I don't. And
you gotta pull the Hansel and Gretel and throw some breadcrumbs.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because they get confounded. They're like, what do we like?
That's great.
I love making a setting that might appeal to one of my players. Like, I love to include that. And I love to focus on the newest player because I want them to have agency and I want them to be included. I want them to feel included right off the bat. Because I've already asked the question, like, what do you want this adventure to be? And I did that. And one of my players, her background was she was a new player, and her family, she was a halfling, and she's a sorcerer. So she has dragon blood within her line, right? And that's how she comes about with her powers of sorcery.
Interesting. Okay.
So, but her job was, her family were tea merchants. Okay. So her story has been building, and she has a tea set with her,
Okay.
and she would make tea. And so this setting that I created was essentially a Japanese meditation garden and a tea house with rice paper walls and everything. But to gain access, she needed the help of another player who was a monk to do all the meditations. She knew some of them, but he knew all of them. And so he taught the other players, like, I do this. We did it through skill checks and everything, performance checks and whatnot.
Right.
And so they had to go along this little meditation route in this beautiful garden to get into the tea house. But because she knew tea, that gave her historical advantage in different places. So she'd ask if she knew about something. Well, she's going into this tea house. Now, what they faced in the tea house was there were cultists who were invisible, and there was a person visiting this tea house who was the magister of a city. Only she figured it out.
Right.
She figured out that this person was actually a changeling, a doppelganger, disguised, and they were practicing in order to gain entrance into the city and overthrow the city.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's clever.
So she said, like, do I know her? I said, the ancient tea ceremonies of her people, right? Because that was her historical reference point, right? Because her family traded in tea. And I said, she comes from the city of Aranthus, and she's the magister of Aranthus. But something's a little off. She goes, and she came up with it. She's like, is she wearing her necklace that she would wear? I'm like, no, she's not. And then they attacked.
I love it.
Because there were things that were out of place. And then all of a sudden the cultists start attacking and become visible. But then there's extra added layers. It's like, okay, I have a pretty powerful party, so I have to challenge them, right? I'm not looking at, out and out. If the roll happens and they die, okay, that happens, but it's not me out trying to torture them or kill them or anything else like that. And there were some serious skill checks. So they're searching and they're going, and I had one player decided to stay in the tea house because he was the one that meditated and showed. He was a Harangan. He was the rabbit folk.
Okay. Excellent.
And he's a rabbit folk monk, and he knew, this was keyed for the both of them. And really I created it so they would have time to interact with each other and everybody else.
Right.
And the tea house, the actual outer walls of the tea house, were giant mimics.
Oh my God.
They were giant horde mimics. So they are the side of a building. Like each of them was one side of the building.
Yikes. That's quite an enemy to encounter.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I placed those mimics on the outside of the building to look exactly like the building, right? But I did it, and I had it so that they would follow the meditation route, because I knew some players might go, oh, let's just cut our way into this beautiful tea room.
Right.
So they came out of the tea room after the fight, and he goes, and one of the players was like, I just cut through the wall to get back into the tea room and search the place. I'm like, oh, you do? Okay. Roll to hit the building. Well, he wasn't rolling to hit the building. He was rolling to hit the mimic that was disguised as the building.
Right.
And then the fight ensued, because now they hit this thing's huge. And then in doing it, they woke up the other one. So if they didn't attack it, if they left it alone, they would never have encountered it.
Right.
But if they got lazy and they tried to cut their way into this building, then it was on.
Do you give them the big roll for initiative?
All the time. Yeah. Roll for initiative. And then I'll roll stuff, and there are things that I roll along the way, and I go and I set the parameters for myself.
Right.
I don't really. It's funny. I have this one D20 that I've played with them, and it rolls terribly. It should be in a dice jail forever at this point.
I've got.
But sometimes that's the die that I have, and I just pick up whatever die, like is it for, and I roll it, and I don't want them to see my rolls on D&D Beyond, because I use D&D Beyond. I've used Roll20 in that.
Right.
And yes, I know I can make that roll to myself, but I love dice. So I always have the die in front of me, and that just helps me visually. Yep. And everything's like, okay. So yeah, I will absolutely say roll for initiative. And I will say, if they're like, I want them to, the critical role, phrase of, how do you want to do this?
Uh-huh.
It's a beautiful thing. It's literally a beautiful phrase, because the excitement that it generates once you start using it is palpable. Like it's like, they're like, oh my gosh. And and that is actually, when somebody gets a critical hit, when they roll a nat 20, and I want them to describe it.
Absolutely.
And I find that people, that to me is a way of getting people into role playing that might not role play.
Mm-hmm.
Just describe it for me. What does it look like? Like you and somebody will go, like, I have my battle axe and I cleave its head in two, or what? And it could be the simplest, straightforward thing. And sometimes they pick up on that and they just eat it up like candy. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah.
So, I had
my final blow is a spinning death kick, and like, whatever it might, whatever it might entail.
It wasn't the final blow, but I was playing a Dhampir, a half vampire, and we were. This happened just recently. We were fighting a dragon, and they have I think it's called Vampiric Bite. I can't remember what the ability is, but you can fanged bite, and you can sink your fangs into something, and not only does it inflict damage, but when you roll the damage die, you get back that same amount of points as
like a life
points.
Drain. Yeah.
And so I'm like, I jump on the neck of the dragon and sink my teeth into it and drain it of its life force.
Yeah.
And I think I had to roll an athletics check to actually climb onto the back of the dragon, and I had to roll I think 2 different ability checks to actually get on the back of the dragon first before I could even do that. It's just so much fun. And then one of our other party members was able to kill the dragon, and they one of their things is they always like cutting off the heads of the enemies. They keep the heads of the enemies as trophies. And so they were trying to cut off the head of the dragon. And I'm like, hang on, I'm still on its neck. I'm like, I'm like, don't hit me. So I'm trying to get out of the way of them slicing off the head of the dragon, and it was just they had a roll to avoid hitting me as part of the activity. But it was so much fun. It's great when you can describe when you get the opportunity to
Yeah.
describe all that and really get into the action.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
And I think even the simplest of descriptions, I think is sort of the gateway or the key to more role playing.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
And when people are having fun doing that, and I don't discourage if somebody's not ready for role playing. There's no forcing anybody into it. That just makes it not fun.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I like the idea of describing things as the simplest of role playing. And it's funny, you said they like cutting off the heads of things that have trophies and stuff. So I have a magic item for you, if that's okay.
Ooh, I love magic items.
I came up with a magic item, and it's based on a bag of holding. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It is the bag of assembly.
The bag of assembly. Okay.
Yeah. And what the bag of assembly does is when you have players that want to keep trophies, you throw in a bag of assembly instead of a bag of holding. It looks just like a bag of holding, can act just like a bag of holding.
All right.
But one of the players, it's actually a partially cursed item.
Okay. So
What it
do
really
tell.
is it's a trophy bag, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can just like list it as like this is a trophy bag. So it's a bag of holding, but just for trophies for monsters and stuff like that.
Right.
Well, the player is compelled by the bag to collect a specific type of trophy. Could be an arm, could be a hand, could be a head, could be a wing, could be a leg, foot, toes, whatever pieces, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as the thing goes, what they're actually doing is they're actually assembling a monster.
I had a feeling that's where this was going.
Yeah. So they are like you are compelled, like the trophy on this monster is
Mm-hmm.
you want that arm. It's kind of like Rocket Raccoon always wanting appendages for people, right? In Guardians.
Right.
And that served as part of the inspiration for this. But I'm like, okay, well, what if there was like a basically almost like a mimic bag, but the mimic needed more parts, but the bag is actually the brain of the creature itself.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
once it has an entire body, so you just keep on track of what they have in the bag.
Right.
And the minute they assemble anything, like, oh, if there's a better item, the bag goes, ooh, that's a better. I want that. I want that head, or I want that leg, or that. And once you get to a place where it's and guess what? The bag levels up just like they do. So the bag gets harder and harder to beat.
Oh my.
Because it's constantly collecting things. And you just, and basically I set it up to roll like, does the bag attack? Right. And it becomes like a random encounter. Like, does the bag feel complete? Like
Right.
I keep a list of what they're carrying in the
Mhm.
bag. And once they get to a full body, I'm like, is the bag greedy? Do they know they're going after? Like, the bag can hear what they're doing, that kind of thing. So it's a very
Just wait for a long rest when they're all
Yep.
asleep.
Exactly. Did you get your long rest? No, I'm sorry, you don't have your spells back. Now you got to fight the bag of assembly.
That's right. That's
And
great.
yeah, it's a vicious item, but it's a fun item because like people that I have a player in one of my games who is a chaos gremlin,
Mm-hmm.
and like one of those would be ideal for him because he came to me. We started playing again, and he came to me and he said, "Look, I got an idea for a character." I'm like, "Okay," and I thought he was pulling it right out of Deadpool. He goes, "No, I'm just this guy named Peter. I'm going to be a bard, but I'm just going to be a guy who plays guitar on the weekends for his friends." And he's not very good. He goes, he's good at talking to people, but every time he plays, you kind of feel like you've been robbed. Like you didn't
Mm-hmm.
really get the performance like that he was leading up to.
Right.
And he's like describing the guy in Deadpool 2 that's just like the guy that shows up.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I said, look, I'm going to do you one better. I'll let you play that character. And this is before we've even played, one session. I'm like, I'll let you play the character, but you have to do this. You can be Peter. You can play him any way you want. But I'm going to destroy your character. I'm going to kill him. Because in order to be Peter, you have to have made a pact with a demon, elemental, whatever. It doesn't matter. Pact with whatever. I said, you've made a pact with a fae. And they basically took out an insurance policy out on you. So you have to die in a very public way. But the greatest thing is, if somebody collects your ashes, you get reconstituted every day. But you get blown apart. You just die in some very public, awful way, so that the fae can collect the insurance policy on you.
Uh-huh.
And so the players meet him, and they know he's a chaos gremlin. They know he is all about the chaos.
Right.
And they're like, what are you doing? They're like, don't be this character. Don't. And then basically they were all walking together, and I said, and a giant fireball hits you from above. And the rest of the party, I'm like, it does no damage to you. Actually, you feel pretty invigorated. And I gave them like a blessing instead of blowing them apart with a fireball. But it incinerated Peter Markey, the character.
Right.
And then like you just see a pillar of ash, and he just crumbles to the ground. Right. And now there's investigation and stuff like that. The town constable, like everything. And they're like, we're out of here. Right. So they're going to run into that character again and again, because it's just going to be a running bit. Because
it's amazing. I love
this
that.
player, he loves a good bit, and he'll play to the bit.
That's amazing.
He commits to the bit, and it's just fun. But I mean, that's, the length and breadth. And I make fun of the fact that, you have first time players that are hesitant to like choose their class or race or what have you. And then you have, an experienced player who's full of chaos, who wants to play a loaf of bread that has become self-aware. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. It's ridiculous to the nth degree. But somehow you let everybody have their fun.
That's what it comes down to. So yes, let's everybody absolutely should have their fun. So
yeah,
let's do this. We're running out of time. So what would be what are some parting words to the new people in, let's say you're assembling a new table of new players. What are your opening words of wisdom to this new group?
What makes it fun for you? Right there. What's the story we want to tell together?
Mm-hmm.
What makes it fun for you? I don't necessarily, unless somebody comes to me and says, I want to play a bad guy. I kind of discourage that right away.
Right.
But I do give players the opportunity to play the other side of things, like subconsciously or unconsciously. Like all of a sudden they figure out they're not the good guys.
Right.
That kind of thing. So it's kind of like, and the lesson of that is the words to give of that is like, lean into what you're playing and have fun with it. Like really let yourself have fun. Let yourself play. And I go to this. I'm like, I said this to somebody one time when I was teaching them, and I said, okay, and they wanted homework, right? So what's the homework I would give my players? I would say this thing: it's okay to play, and it's play what you want. Play the hero. Play the person you see in the movies that's in your favorite movie, or the favorite hero in the book. Like, is your life like, is your character like theirs? Is that how you want them to be? Is that what you want? Like, hey, I want to be a fighter and be like Optimus Prime meets Yoda meets Captain Kirk meets Han Solo. Like,
why not?
Why not? Okay, let's incorporate something. What are the things of those, like, Do you have to come to a table with an idea? No, that's what the table is all about. It's all about kind of coming together. And does everybody have to know your story? No. Do you have to have the whole story? No, but hopefully along the way you're writing that story. So it's kind of like be open to your imagination.
I love that. Be open to your imagination. It really is. It's your character in the game is really just a blank sheet of paper waiting for you to tell your own story. So, James,
Absolutely.
thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I love this chat. Always good talking with you.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Legends, Loot, and Lore. We hope you've enjoyed immersing yourself in the realms of Legends, uncovering hidden loot, and delving into captivating lore. But the journey doesn't end here. For exclusive content, behind-the-scenes insights, and access to our community, visit legendslootandlore.supercast.com. There you'll be able to support the podcast, where you can join our Discord server for lively discussions and subscriber-only content, and connect with fellow enthusiasts. Stay connected with us on Instagram and Facebook at Legends, Loot, and Lore to continue on the quest. By following our social media channels, you'll be the first to know about upcoming episodes, bonus content, and exciting announcements. If you've enjoyed your time with us, we kindly ask you to rate and subscribe to this podcast. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue producing captivating episodes and embarking on new quests. Thank you for being a part of our journey. We're thrilled to have you by our side as we unravel the legends, uncover the loot, and delve deeper into the lore. Until next time.